Where's the energy? Come on. I see this side's excited. How's this excited? Everybody's good? Oh, I see a pudgy penguin back there too. I like that. I like that. Well, I'm glad we got a little bit of energy. I know we're late in the day. I can imagine you guys are tired. You know, we've been hearing a lot. It gets really technical really quickly. But I want to make this as fun as possible for you guys. I want to really bring some energy. Like, these crypto conferences can feel really dry sometimes. So let's make it a little bit more fun. So, you know, as mentioned, my name is Amir Mehrbakhsh. I lead marketing for the Walrus Foundation. Now, a little bit of context here. We just heard from Christian originally. He was given the high-level vision of, you know, what is SWE, how it works specifically, what's the high-level vision of it. Separately, you just heard Costas. He was talking a bit more about the future, thinking about AI, the fun, really innovative things. He's a mad scientist in his own capacity. But what I'm going to talk about is then the next step. So when we're thinking about the internet more broadly, you hear a lot about L1s, you hear a lot about compute, but there's so much more to it. And we look at data, we look at storage as that next step. So that's what I'm going to look to talk about today. So with that, first, before talking about Walrus and what it is, you know, Walrus in itself is its own foundation. So Walrus with that can provide its own set of resources. When we think about financial support, when we think about engineering support, and when we think about amplification as part of our goal to more broadly tell a narrative related to data, that is what the Walrus Foundation exists to do. Our goal is to provide the right resources to ensure that anyone here, if you're a builder, if you're a designer, if you're a marketer, it doesn't matter. We are here to help you on your journey to figure out how data and storage fits as part of your solution, whatever you're building. So with that, there's a couple things I do want to talk about. First, what is Walrus? I've mentioned it a few times, but we're going to really get into what it is, why it matters, why you should care. We're going to talk about what's now possible. It's been live for about 3-ish months now. It's still relatively new, but there's a lot that's moving already, a lot of things that you can really tap into, and a lot of new use cases that are coming along. Current progress, we're going to talk about progression, cool partners. I saw Pudgy in the background. That's a great example of just one of the many partners that's working with Walrus already. And then, you know, as you can clearly see, we're a sizably technical team, and we are very much looking forward to really keeping the roadmap robust, keeping you excited, and showing you all the cool things that are coming on next. So with that, let's first get into Walrus. I'm not going to get into the technical side. I really just want to focus on the high-level vision of why does this exist. Currently, anyone here that's a builder is going to have to engage with data and is going to have to engage with storage. However, what the problem is currently is around the idea that it is currently incredibly expensive to use a decentralized storage solution right now. Because if you look at the white box here, imagine that's a document. Imagine that's my script right now. If I was going to replicate that on decentralized storage, I would currently have to put all of that on there. For a document, fine. But when we think about a music video, when we think about a movie, when we think about an AI model, that doesn't get practical anymore. So what happens here is we take a couple pieces or slivers, specifically of a file of a movie or whatever, treat them almost like puzzle pieces, and we don't need that many to still replicate what is the entirety of a file. Something like that makes it a lot more practical when we think about the idea of having bigger types of files in Web3. We're no longer capped to transaction data. We're no longer capped to documents. Anything is now possible in terms of the type of media file that you want to use. That's what makes Walrus really exciting. That's where the really exciting stuff is on the technical side. And one thing to call out here, you'll see SWE. Obviously, SWE is included. SWE is definitely really where you see a lot of promise in terms of what you can do here. But what's really cool about Walrus is that you can also work with any blockchain. Let's say Solana tomorrow wants to use Walrus, no problem. Ethereum wants to use Walrus tomorrow, no problem. This can work with any blockchain within the entirety of the ecosystem. Everyone can do more with how their data and how storage works. Any builder can use this. So with that, let's talk about some of the values, what makes Walrus really attractive. I really break it up into 2 different pieces. One, when we think about the storage solution itself, if we're all going to be like, okay, we don't want to use centralized servers anymore, we want to actually use a decentralized solution right now, you know, that's really hard. There's only so much you can do because of the fact that it's incredibly expensive. Everything that was talked about before related to replication just leads to cost. It's way too expensive for you to store at scale. That's one thing that Walrus solves. Second, scalability. When we talk about documents versus large media files, we want to ensure that if your business is successful and all of a sudden you have 100 movies and you become like Netflix or whatever you may be, whatever big company you become, Walrus can scale with you. And finally, you want to make sure when you're running your business that all of a sudden it doesn't shut down. All of a sudden your data is missing. All of a sudden you get a 404 error. You can't get that. And this is exactly what we're trying to solve, where even if some of the nodes are going down, Walrus still works, business as usual, no interruption to you. Now, that's all great in saying that, yes, this is going to perform really well, this is going to be a really strong protocol. Great, all of that's fantastic, gets close enough to what centralized servers are. But we're in the business of Web3. We want to think about what really is possible here. What can you add on top of what's possible? This is where this gets a lot more exciting. Smart contracts, first. Data is not intended to be, with Walrus, something that just sits on a shelf collecting dust. You are not looking to just store something and forget about it. That is not the goal. Web3 has so much more potential beyond that. The idea is, okay, this data is here, now how can I do something with it? Smart contracts are naturally something we're all familiar with, and the idea is, how can I program new capabilities? How could I start to track the idea of my data and selling it in a marketplace? How could I look at the idea of how data could fit with DeFi protocols? There is a limitless amount of opportunities of what you can do with data that goes beyond just storage. That's the point that we're trying to hit on. That's what's really important here, is how I can do more with my data. Separately, when we think about the app ecosystem, I've only mentioned we've been live for about 3 months. But even amidst that, we've built out a series of different applications that are incredibly important in thinking about what are the additional pieces that we can add here to the protocol, whether it's Walrus sites. Best way I can compare that is any website that exists right now, what if that was decentralized? What if we could make it so it didn't go down in the future? Walrus sites is very intended on solving that problem. Seal and Nautilus focus on taking the next step in terms of whether it's access rights. Look back to the whole vision of the NFT boom when everyone was talking about token gating and you could tokenize the ticket and all these things that everyone promised in 2021. That wasn't realized, but it is now possible. And then Nautilus, focusing on things like AI models, other things that are more data intensive and making sure that we can still trust it just as much as ensure that it operates. So I promised that I was going to make this a little bit more fun. Let's give an example of how this works. Anyone here a Taylor Swift fan? Just me? Okay, cool. There you go. When we think about different capabilities of things that are really possible here, there's a bunch that goes beyond just storage. So whether it's the idea of looking at storage in itself as an asset that can be tradable, if I have storage and I want to give you storage, I can now do that. It is something that is passable. We can interact. Storage capabilities are something that are not bound to just you. Separately, when we think about the data lifecycle management, sure, I can look at when the data was originally stored. I can look at how it progresses over all the way to the point of when it gets deleted, and I can interact with it throughout those processes. Separately, though, what's really attractive here and the thing that I'm most excited about, let's take this example right here. So when we think about storage today, the way that it works in blockchain is that you have just the ticket itself, and you can store that ticket on an existing storage solution within Web3. But there are so many pieces of data that ties to that ticket. Whether it's which section am I going to sit in, what seat am I going to sit in, what time can I enter the stadium. There's so much that goes into defining a ticket and making my ticket different than your ticket. And so when we think about the opportunities that lie here, this is where I get most excited about, because we can now program experiences based on those specific attributes. Now I can say that anyone that sits in a certain section, anyone that sits in a certain seat, anyone that shows up by a certain period of time can have certain things that are different than other people's. Let's take this as an example. So I'll bring up Taylor Swift. So our managing executive for the Walrus Foundation recently went to the Taylor Swift concert. And one thing that would be have been interesting is, let's say she's a super fan. Let's say she's really loves Taylor Swift and she buys front row seat. She's sitting right here. Let's say that then Taylor Swift and her company on the side decide anyone that sits in the front row, anyone that pays for the super premium ticket can meet Taylor Swift right after the concert. That was something that was promised to us in 2021, but was not actually practical. But with a solid data protocol, we can now actually tie the data of who sits here to the action that comes of meeting Taylor Swift. That was not finally possible in a way that it wasn't before. That's what gets me really excited about how not only Walrus exists, but how it can work with something like a Sui or a Solana or any of these other ecosystems. So with that, we've seen a variety of different partnerships that are coming along. This is something that is applicable to all different ecosystems. I mentioned the idea of ticketing, IP, entertainment is definitely something that's interesting here, but there's plenty more as it relates to AI models, whether it's related to DePIN, whether it's related to even other ecosystems. We're already seeing full ecosystems now start to use Walrus. Use cases are limitless, and then the ability to support any ecosystem maintains as something that's really strong and a really attractive thing for Walrus. Now, I'm not going to get into all of this details, but the thing I do want to emphasize here is that Walrus, in being live for about 3 months, is not only growing really substantially, but I do want to emphasize the idea that this is quality data. This isn't just trash data that's going to sit there where it's pictures of people's cats. No, that's not the goal here. The goal is to make sure that there's a limitless amount of data that exists on Walrus that does not stress the network, but also ensure that it's being regularly used, tied back, adding value. We're looking for valuable data in all of this. So, looking forward, as mentioned, there's a couple things that are worth calling out. We have Seal, Nautilus, and then additional optimizations that are happening to the network. We're about 3 months in, but we are shipping quite substantially. There's a lot that's going to continue to come in. But the things that I do want to call out for this audience is that, look, if any of you guys are builders, if any of you guys are thinking of launching your own project, you are going to come into a need to engage with data in some capacity. It's a non-negotiable. And if you're thinking about the idea of really being committed to decentralization, if you're thinking about the idea of really going beyond just the basic applications or things that everyone's doing in crypto right now, you are going to need a really strong data protocol. And if you really want to move forward, why not with Walrus? We're here to commit the full stack. So thanks. This is me. This is everything with mine. If you want to join our community, everything's right here. But looking forward to you guys all joining the Walrus herd. Thanks.